It is our pleasure to be joined by the executive director. Yeah, executive director. That's how you know he's important of the Reese's Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy is in the house. Nags, what's going on, man?
Dude, stop it. No, it's good to be
You're
on with
wearing
you
a
guys.
suit. You've changed, bro. You've
I know
changed.
I gotta get this off. No, man, it's good to be on with you. It's good to be talking football. There's a lot of other distractions and stuff going on right now that aren't football related. Anytime I can talk football, we're back at
Now, is this your least favorite time of year or your most
it.
favorite? Because I know it's probably a lot of fun, but it equals a ton of work, right?
Yeah, and again, I'm so lucky, guys. I mean, I have to say it. Our staff is unbelievable. Going back to what time you guys played, I mean, we've got some support staff people. Dean Kleinschmidt, our trainer, is going on his 53rd Senior Bowl. So, like, we have some people that have been around this game for a long time that care a lot about it. So it makes my job easier, a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, I'll say this: like the week leading in isn't a lot of fun because it's just a lot of operational stuff and odds and ends and the best time is player first day of practice. Like when you get all the guys here, they're out there in their pads, they got all the different helmets on, and it's real football again. And you're seeing like some of these guys I haven't seen play live. Like a lot, our staff has. We've got scouts all over the country, but like some of these guys I'm seeing for the first time in person, man. So it's that's my favorite time. This part not so much. We're just trying to get them here first.
So there was a big change this year for you and for your staff. Underclassmen are now eligible for the Senior Bowl. How much different did that make the evaluation process and how you guys handled the invitations for this year's game?
Yeah, that thing got announced at the beginning of November, and I think people thought that we, would get caught with our pants down, if you will. But the nice thing was the league office gave us a heads up, like in August, that they were thinking about it, and so our scouts were out all fall looking at the juniors. They were on the board, like we were building the board with the junior class. So again, there's always some juniors that surprise you that you don't account for, guys that just kind of pop up on you. But for the most part, I think we did a good job scouting up those players. And in terms of putting the roster and the invite process together, yeah, it certainly changed. I mean, I'll have to go back after this season, and once we get through the game, and kind of self scout us, and how did we do a good job? Did we, can we do it better? But you can't invite a full 120, 130 on your roster of seniors when there's good juniors out there. Let's face it. I mean, usually the guys that come out as juniors are our top 3 or 4 round players. We're talking about like fringe top 100 players. So, there was probably a couple spots that like we didn't get any junior wide receivers, which is like shocking to me. Like we had 4 or 5 spots reserved for those guys. We had 7 top 100 receivers last year in the game. Puka Nakua, Tank Dell, Rashi Rice, Jaden Reed, like all these guys that blew up this year in the NFL. I mean, we've done a really nice job. Our staff's done a great job scouting that position. And we couldn't get any of those juniors to buy into it. But we got like 6 safeties, and we've got a bunch of, we got some like first and second round offensive linemen. So, I think we're just going to have to go back next year and look at maybe I over allocated for juniors at certain spots, but it just made for a different process, I'd say more of a fluid process, right? Because once the juniors declare, and they either say they're going to play the game or not going to play, well, then you circle back to the next group of seniors that you liked, and you bring those guys. So it certainly changed the process.
Well, it's interesting, and maybe this is more of a draft question than it is Senior Bowl, but like, how much has the NIL situation impacted a lot of those juniors that maybe were on the fence, or guys that just straight up would have declared previously, now that there's some money to be made and maybe feel like they can have a better year? How many guys are you seeing it a lot more that guys are sticking around to play an extra year?
A lot. Like I can't even express to you how different this year was. I mean, I'll say this. So we've got our board set. We said that first wave of invites in November, we start getting all these acceptances back, and I hope I don't want to sound a certain way, but I got this feedback a lot from the agent community. Was like, Jim, when this senior didn't get your invite, like that kind of told him like where he stood, and he probably should go back to school. So then you had guys like taking that money. The schools were offering the NIL money. The kid didn't think he had a Senior Bowl invite. And again, I'm not trying to make it sound like our game's the end all be all by any means. I'm not trying to sound like that. But guys were just like, you know what, I'm going to take $100,000 or $200,000 and go back and play another year of college. Now, I think where the players need help is really navigating the dollars and cents of it, because I was put in the position in the middle a few times this fall, which I've never been done, where like coaches would ask me to meet with their players about trying to keep them in school for another year. And for me, it's like, you guys know this, like, it doesn't make sense for every kid to go back and use that extra COVID year. Sometimes as evaluators, as you know, as a former scout, you would sit in draft rooms, and this isn't like a negative thing at all. You know, certain players have high ceilings and they're just scratching it, and they're raw, their best football is still ahead of them. And then there's other guys that are, you know, they're kind of tapped out. They are what they are. That's not a bad thing. You know, there's certain guys that, you know, they project as backup level players in the NFL, and guys that can play for 10 years as, you know, a good special teams player and a backup. But if he goes back for another year of college, he's not really helping his draft stock at all. Like, he was going to be a 4th rounder this year because of some sort of physical limitation, why the league feels like he has a ceiling. Or if he goes back next year, he'll be a 4th rounder. So the players need help. Like, if we're going to be in this whole extra COVID year, NIL money, draft thing, like, I saw a lot of players making some decisions that from a football perspective, and again, I don't care. The Senior Bowl, like, we got the players we wanted to get. So it's more about the depth of the draft for the teams and more about the player themselves. Some players weren't making great football decisions just because they could go back and make like $100,000. But if you go to the NFL as a 5th round draft pick and you make the roster with your signing bonus, you're making like $1.5 million. So like, I'm not a math guy, but like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, so I don't know, man, I'm getting long-winded on you, but it really was a convoluted process. It was for players, I'm sure it was a really tricky process. You know, you have your coaches asking you to come back, and you got NIL money people coming at you. And, you know, it's a lot for these players to navigate, man. I feel for them.
So that's an interesting transition into talking about the OU guys. And what you just laid out, Jim, it's kind of exactly what Dillon Gabriel talked about when he said he's going to go back to college for another year. Now he ends up at Oregon. But is that the perfect example of a guy that looked at the situation, didn't have an invite to the Senior Bowl from you guys, and said, hey, maybe the best decision for me is to go back to college for another year? That's kind of the first example that popped into my head as you were laying that out.
And Dillon was one of the guys that he mentioned it. He's like, I didn't get a Senior Bowl invite. And again, Dillon Gabriel's had a great year, man. Like, it's no slight. We take a lot of backlash on social media. Like, Dillon Gabriel had a great year for Oklahoma. It doesn't, you know, but again, being a great college player doesn't, and this isn't even to Dillon, but like, I think sometimes fans don't understand like the difference between being a really good college player and being an NFL player. I mean, you guys have done it. It's 2 different things, right? I mean, you can be a great college player and not be a great pro prospect. I mean, I'm not talking about Dillon right now.
Oh, I'm a perfect example of that. That's me, man. It's fine. You're not insulting me. It's fine.
Hey, look at all the stuff behind your wall, man. I got none of that. So, I mean, shoot. But in Dillon's case, like, the quarterbacks are a little different. Like, there is real money to be made in the quarterback market. I mean, I hear a lot of these numbers from the agents. I mean, these guys are making, you know, upwards north of 7 figures. So that's where it does make sense. Like, if you were going to be a 6th or 7th round quarterback, but you could go back to college and make $2 million at, pick a school, Auburn or Michigan or Ohio State or Florida, like, you're probably better off. You're probably better off going and making that guaranteed money rather than if you're a 6th or 7th round draft pick quarterback, you're rolling the dice. Usually those guys end up on practice squads. So quarterback's a little bit different. For some of these other position players, I don't know. It seems like some of these guys went back and they're taking way less money just because it's so new. They didn't have they didn't have buddies. They didn't be like, hey, what did you do? Like, how did you handle this? Like, it's all new to these guys. So again, man, I don't envy where they're at.
And it's got to be weird too, with, you know, the portal rules and the COVID year. I mean, there's probably some players that are coming to the Senior Bowl, maybe some of the older guys that you've ever seen there, and maybe those guys don't end up as a Senior Bowl invite. But it's like the next couple of years, and maybe you can include last year. It's just the classes seem strange.
They seem really strange, and it's hard to track. I mean, we were trying to add a player last night. I saw he put something on Twitter. He's coming out. He hadn't said that before, so you call him, and he's just had a labrum surgery. So then we had a DB fall out a couple days ago. So at this time of the year, we've got our board stacked, and there's a clump on the board. Like, the next guy's up, I take a screenshot of it. I send the picture to like 15 buddies around the NFL that are like director level guys that have access to all their grades and can give me really good feedback. And one of the guys that came back is like the top guy. I called his college head coach. I'm like, where's so-and-so at now? He's like, oh man, he injured his foot. He's coming back next year. He's coming back here. But none of the teams do it. Like, NFL teams didn't know this guy's going back to college yet. So there is just like, man, the extra COVID year, it's gotten really murky, really messy. No one knows where these players are at, what they're playing. I mean, you're going to show up to the pro days, and there's going to be guys at pro day to work out and be like, man, I thought you were going back to school. So yeah, it's a really kind of chaotic time in the college football world. And again, not to like go on another tangent, but look, we just saw Nick Saban, the greatest head coach of all time. He basically retired because of it. It's just, it's crazy right now. So yeah, man, lots going on.
Let's talk about a couple of the OU guys. You've got 2 OU guys that are participating. Let's start with Tyler Guyton, man. This is a guy, I think a couple of years ago, I sent you something. Hey,
I remember.
Remember this name, bud. And just how excited are you to get Guyton down in Mobile?
Oh, so fired up, man, just because I know what it's going to look like. And I know the jump he's going to make, in this draft process. The word freak and the words like buzzwords, like people talk about generational talents now, like, man, that stuff wears me out. But Tyler Guyton has some freaky stuff to him physically. Like, there's only a handful of, there's 2 or 3 freaks in every draft. Tyler Guyton's different now. Like, you saw him before I did. You pointed him out before I saw him. I mean, former tight end at TCU. Sooners fans obviously know this guy, but like, when you put on the tape, he floats out there. I mean, he absolutely floats. Like, everyone's talking about Olu Fashanu from Penn State and Joe Alt from Notre Dame being the top 2 tackles in this year's draft, and not slighting either of those players at all because they're not playing the Senior Bowl. It has nothing to do with that. Those guys are great players. They're going to be good pros. But I think Tyler Guyton's got a higher ceiling than both of those guys. I mean, he does things you can't coach. He does things physically, athletically, in space, covering people up in pass protection, just dancing with them, that those other 2 guys can't do. Now, you could make the argument those 2 guys might be a little more pro ready. They've logged a lot more starts in college football than Tyler has, because, he was logjam behind Anton Harrison and Wanye last year. But you talk about best football ahead of him. The guy he reminded me of when I did him, and scouts like to do this, and I don't like to do it unless it's really like a spot on, everything lines up, body type, athleticism, play style, all the things, is Tyron Smith, the former USC tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, this guy, because Tyron played right tackle at USC as well. He was not a left tackle in college, even though he was so athletic, similar to Guyton. And we've seen what Tyron Smith has done. That's the guy when I started watching him. So I'm excited to get him here. Again, I think he's just going to, this is going to be the start of the Tyler Guyton pre-draft process ascension. So, if he ends up in that, I'd be surprised if he didn't end up in the top 10 when this whole thing's said and done.
It feels like tackle is a position where, if you've got a guy that's maybe not as polished, is transitioning from like a tight end, but the measurables are there and the testing numbers are there, that teams are willing to take. I mean, it's not a flyer, but you're willing to risk with a really high pick the possible upside. And maybe there's not a whole lot of positions like that.
No, and it's because they can keep your quarterback healthy, right? I mean, look at the NFL this year with how many backups played. The number was whatever it was. We ended up starting 60 quarterbacks in the NFL, 60-some quarterbacks. It was crazy. But yeah, you're right. And I think where all you have to do is look at another former Sooner, Lane Johnson. I mean, look at Lane. We just put him in our Senior Bowl Hall of Fame a couple summers ago, and he talked about it. He's like, man, his JUCO background as a quarterback and goes there as a tight end, and whatever. He played defensive end for a couple of days in practice, whatever. I mean, he had this really cool background, but he wasn't the finished product. And he came to Mobile, and I was still with the Kansas City Chiefs. That was the Eric Fisher, Luke Jokel, Lane Johnson draft. And those guys all ended up in the top 4. Lane went 4th. And coming into Mobile, all those guys were like, well, I would say this. I would say Jokel was considered a top 10 pick, but Eric Fisher and Lane Johnson were like late 1s, early 2s. And then they come down here and have a great week. And so I think that, and why Lane is great, and you guys know this because I know you know Lane, like he's made of the right stuff too. He's competitive. He's freaking nasty. He's tough. I mean, tough as hell. So, the league is going to try to figure out if Tyler has those things. That's what made Lane a great player, a perennial All-Pro. Tyler's got the physical stuff. You can see that on the tape. What they're going to drill down on here in Mobile and the rest of the process is how he's wired. And if he's wired right, there's no reason the guy shouldn't be an All-Pro.
I'm with you. And my conversations with Tyler over the last couple of years, I think he wants to be great. And like you mentioned, Nags, I think that's a big part of this whole thing. Now, the other Sooner you'll have down in Mobile is Andrew Raym. What did you think of Raym as you evaluated the tape?
He is like your classic center. Like he's not. And I didn't go to OL Masterminds with Duke Manyweather over the summer, but our DFO did. And he met Andrew there and loved the guy. But he said, he's like, Jim, no, he doesn't feel real big when you get up on him, so that's probably going to make him a center only at the next level. But when you talk about not having a ton of position versatility, they better be a starter. And I think Andrew Raym's going to be a starting center. I do. I mean, you know better than I, way better than I do. But I mean, you can play a long time in the NFL at that position if you have high-end makeup stuff, smarts, toughness, competitiveness, dependability, understanding the game, not just smarts like helping the quarterback out and setting protections and doing all that stuff, but like just knowing how to play, the spatial awareness, the timing. He's got all that stuff. And he was trained by, Bill Bedenbaugh's unbelievable. We've talked about it on the show before, what a great job Bill does. Did an unbelievable job with Walter Rouse this year. I don't know if you were going to ask me about Walter, but Bill did an awesome job.
I'm going to ask you why you didn't invite him. You know that.
But Bill did an awesome job with Walter Rouse, getting him from what he looked like on Stanford tape to what he looked like on Sooner tape this fall. So yeah, man, we're excited to get Andrew here. Those guys will be on the same squad. They'll be on the American squad with all the other SEC guys. It's basically the SEC versus the world this year on that American team versus the national. So it should be a lot of fun.
What was the story with Rouse? How'd that whole situation unfold?
Yeah, that's a great question. He was one of those guys that, we certainly liked enough to invite to the Senior Bowl. I mean, he deserves to be here. Again, I'll say this, I can't speak to games before the Senior Bowl. I was in the league at that point, but I can just speak to the last 5 years. This is the best offensive line crew we're going to have. And we had 5 first rounders my first year here. So that's saying a lot. This is a really deep group. It was the hardest cut we've ever had to make. And we have an arrangement, the league office makes us do like a gentleman's agreement with another one of the All-Star games that we won't take any other players after a certain date. And, when we had a couple low line spots open up because we got like 3 really good juniors on the offensive line. There was a couple more we held spots for that we were hoping to get that we didn't get. So then we wanted to circle back to some of the seniors. And at that point, Walter Rouse was committed to playing another game. And we would have loved to have him, but it is what it is. That's kind of the structure that we're put into.
As the guy that played in the Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl, that's going to make Walter really sad when he hears that. But it is what it is, man. It is what it is. It's fine.
I think he knows, Gabe, because his agent was furious about it when I told him that we couldn't. When I told him we wanted him, but we couldn't go get him, the agent was not happy.
I can only imagine. Now, one more OU guy I want to ask you about, and I understand the NFL. It's a traits league, right? It is a height, length, speed, like all that stuff. But we love Drake Stoops. We love Drake Stoops. I know he was a guy that you guys had your eye on. how close was he to getting an invite? You mentioned you had held a lot of spots at the wide receiver position. He just had such a great year. I was hoping that he would somehow be able to make it in, but it just didn't happen that way.
No, it didn't. That's another. It's. I mean, you asked about. I mean, Walter Rouse and Drake. Those two are probably the two deepest positions in the draft, the overall draft class, and our game as well. It's just wide receivers a really tough nut to crack. When you're only bringing, 14, 15, I think we might be at 16 now, but somewhere in that, that 15-ish wide receivers in the entire country. I mean, think about how schools are throwing the ball around right now. And every school's got, two kids that catch at least 60 balls now on every offense. So that's really a hard position. And Drake did have a great year. I talked to some guys that scout the Southwest. I hit them up about, just the player and the person, really more so the person, because we don't have the budget to be in schools every day. Like we're at games every Saturday, but we're not in the building every day like the teams are. And it sounds like he's unbelievable. I saw the one interview. I want to say he was being asked about whether he was going to play in the bowl game or not. And it was one of the coolest answers I've heard a player give, and just his love for that team. And I mean, I want to invite him just based off that interview, because obviously he's the kind of dude that you want to build a team with. So he'll get his chance with an NFL team. We would have loved to have him here, but he just kind of fell below the line.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing to watch whenever you're there throughout the week of practice and gearing up for the game? And I always think about the O-line, D-line one-on-ones and the receiver one-on-ones. It's like there's a massive amount of money changing hands, and I don't even think that they recognize it at the time. So it's always cool to see those battles. Is that kind of what gets everyone going down there?
Yeah, I think they're the most popular. And again, you don't have to, and this is no knock on the average fan. I mean, I love that people love football, right? And I love that people love watching the Senior Bowl. But not a lot of people can watch 11 on 11 and know exactly what's going on with coverages and protections and things of that nature. But everybody can watch two guys go one-on-one and know who the winner and loser is, right? Like it's pretty defined. We know there's not many stalemates in the one-on-ones. We know who won and who lost. And I think that's what fans love. I actually, when I was doing some stuff at ESPN for a few years, I pitched them on that. I'm like, why don't you do a Senior Bowl one-on-one special, like an hour-long special at the end of the week, and just put together, because fans love that. They know who won. They know who won those battles. So those are a lot of fun. And then I'd say behind the scenes, I love seeing just the interaction with the players from the different schools. I mean, just the bonds that are formed throughout the week. And by the time these guys leave Mobile, and that's just a lot of fun. You get guys that are part of certain rivalries that have played against each other. And I'll share this story real quickly. A few years ago, we had two guys in the game, a Michigan guy, Ben Bredesen, who went in the fourth round to the Ravens, and then Jonah Jackson, who went in the third round to the Lions from Ohio State. And after the game that night, we were all up eating dinner, grabbing some food at the hotel, and I saw this Michigan T-shirt on. It said Bredesen on the back, and I went up and grabbed him by the shoulders. I'm like, great game, Ben. And he turns around, it was Jonah Jackson. So you got this Ohio State guy wearing this Michigan guy's T-shirt. Like, no one would ever think that would happen. But and those two got tight over the course of the week. They were like inseparable. So that's just kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff I love.
That's awesome. Now, you were a scout for a really long time, and I know that you still love grinding the tape. And I know you've got a lot of guys coming to Mobile, but what is a guy or two where you turned on the tape, and after a couple plays, you just turned to your staff and you went, yep, invite that guy? Like it was just an absolute no-brainer right away.
Oh, I mean, Guyton's definitely one of them. That's the thing with this job, man. Like, you don't have to sit there and wear out the tape on guys like Aiden Hutchinson a couple years ago. Like we watched Aiden Hutchinson in the summer, and I don't even know if I watched any Aiden Hutchinson senior tape. Like, he was good at, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're not looking to draft players. They just need to be good enough to come to the Senior Bowl. So that was an easy one. Tyler Guyton's an easy one. I would say, I'm trying to think of guys that, like, I'm looking forward to seeing that were McKinley Jackson. I'm trying to think of like some obscure names that people might. McKinley Jackson's a D tackle from Texas A&M. He's from up the road in Lucedale, Mississippi. It's only about 40 minutes from here. there's a big all-star game. I know that Oklahoma has, in Texas, they have big all-star games in high school too, but the big one over here is like Mississippi against Alabama. It's a huge high school all-star game. And the guys in the media down here that go to that game every year, McKinley Jackson won the MVP of the game from his nose tackle spot. Like, this guy is so explosive. When we put on the junior tape over the summer, he had missed like 5 games last year as a junior, and I put on the Alabama game. Alabama couldn't block this dude. Could not block him. Super explosive, disruptive, just creating havoc. So like in the summertime, I'm thinking we might not be able to get this guy. You know, like he might be one of those guys that's a slam dunk, top 10, top 15 pick, and he doesn't think he needs the Senior Bowl. So I was like worried it was going to be that. But they just played him a little differently there than we'll probably, you know, he's more of a shade, in my opinion. Like he was playing a zero tech at Texas A&M for the most part. So we're going to get him on, you know, shaded on the center at a 3 and a 1 at the 1 and a 3, and let him just rip up field and be explosive. So he's a guy I'm really excited to see. But like tools wise, he jumped off the tape to me. He was an easy one.
You have any favorite kind of success stories? Maybe a guy that was down the list a little bit and maybe a couple guys backed out, a late ad. Maybe you guys had a discussion whether or not he should be there or not, shows up, balls, gets drafted, goes on to have great success.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple quickly. One was Christian Watson, the receiver from the Green Bay Packers. You know, had a monster rookie year last year. This year went through some injury stuff, but you know, part of our process, you and I, we've all talked about it. Like our scouts, you know, go out and scout. We put our board together. Once we feel good about it around Halloween time, that's when we hop on calls with teams, and they last like 3 hours. And we're on these calls. We're going position by position, just sharing grades and sharing notes. And you know, this game is for the teams, not for us. So I want to bring the players the NFL wants to see, but I also want to have us do our own work, so we're not just like fishing grades from teams. But anyway, Christian Watson was like a 4th or 5th round pick for everybody, and he had hands issues at North Dakota State. Like, you knew he was fast and fluid and long and big, but he struggled catching it. And so that's a big deal at receiver, right? Guys that struggle catching the ball. And we brought him down here to Mobile. He's one of the last, I think he might've been the last receiver we took 2 years ago, and ended up being the 34th pick in the draft. I mean, the speed showed up at the FCS level. I remember going up to Northern Iowa and talking to their head coach. They had been there a long, long time, back to when Randy Moss was at Marshall and Marshall was an FCS school. He's like, Jim, did you invite the North Dakota State receiver? Yeah, I said, no, we haven't yet. He goes, he's the fastest FCS kid I've seen since Randy Moss. And then we got Christian down here, and that showed up. I mean, he looked different. And then just talking about an offensive lineman, the COVID year was a crazy year. We had our game. We're, you know, kind of the only thing in the draft process that year. They didn't even have the combine. There's a kid at Wisconsin Whitewater, Quinn Miners, who was training with Duke Manyweather in Dallas. You know, they canceled the Division III season. This kid's from Wisconsin Whitewater. They canceled the season at that level for all schools. He goes down to Duke, and he's training with, oh man, I'm blanking on his name. 1st round pick, San Diego Chargers, went to Northwestern.
Slater.
Yeah, so he and Slater are training at Duke's together. And to his credit, his agent was sending me pictures of those 2 guys training at Duke side by side. Like, what one would get out on a pole, the next guy would get out on a pole. And I loved Slater, Rashawn Slater. I loved Rashawn Slater. He was our top-rated offensive lineman in that draft. It was like him and Penei Sewell. And, you know, the more he sent me these videos, I'm like, man, like, this looks pretty close. Like, these 2 guys aren't that different. And again, when we got on the calls with the teams that year, everyone was like, some 7th round, but mostly everyone had free agent grades on them. I mean, if you're an NFL scout and you put a draftable grade on a D3 player, you are putting your you-know-what's on the table for that guy. I mean, that is a hefty grade for Division III football to say he's going to be in the NFL. But that was the one time we kind of went against where the league had a guy graded. I'd been watching these little highlight videos of practices, of workout sessions. So we brought him, and the rest was history. He was the kind of the talk of the Senior Bowl. His belly was hanging out all week, but he dominated. And Quinn went in the 3rd round of the Denver Broncos, and now he's one of the best guards in football. So those are a couple, man. Sorry, I probably got really long-winded on you.
Those are good.
Last one, and we'll let you get out of here, Jim. The alma mater won it all. How you feeling? It had to be a good feeling. Your Wolverines got it done.
Well, I'll say a couple things. 26 years is a long time. I graduated 96. They won it the next year. Living here in Alabama for as long as I've been and watching all these Tide national championships, it made it probably a little bit sweeter. I was just fearful. If Michigan lost to Alabama, I would have never heard the end of it from my bosses, the people I work with. So I was glad we got that one out of the way. But I was just happy for those players. I mean, I always go back to the players, and that was a rough year, man. I mean, your coach isn't on the sidelines. You got fans and media speculating on whether your wins are legit and if you're stealing signs, and they're trying to downplay like the team you are. And to see that group like come together, like those players didn't even want us to announce their Senior Bowl invites till after they were done playing this year. So we announced them as a group, like all 8 of them. They got the most guys in the game, and so it was cool for those players, man. I mean, to play up until the sign stealing thing, then they had to play Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa in the Big Ten championship, and then the 2 CFP games. So I'm just that was cool. Happy for those guys.
Jim, we always appreciate the time, man. I love that this has become an annual visit. I know you're a very busy man, but I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on. Love hopping on, and appreciate you guys promoting the game, supporting the game.